going to speak with Mr. Enrico Woolford, and he is a broadcaster journalist in Guyana, and we are going to have our conversation about the Guyana-Venezuela dispute. Good morning and welcome, sir, Mr. Woolford.
Good morning. Thank you very much for having me on the program.
Very good. You're speaking with Derek Brotherby Brathwaite and Mr. Jemani Cox. All right. So let's go into what would have sparked this dispute. Is it, and let's go to a little, just take us back from a historical standpoint. Of course, we know the borders between Venezuela and Guyana, the Essequibo. Just speak to us as the genesis of this conflict and how it has managed to have gained international attention now.
Could I say in one word that the genesis of the conflict is greed? And that is where one side decides that they want to move their borders. And you can't move your borders internationally unilaterally. You have to, both sides have to agree, or three sides or four sides. And what has happened here over the years is that Guyana was British Guyana, as most of you know. The British inherited the three counties, the Essequibo, the Demerara, and Berbice. Essequibo being the western front, Berbice being the eastern front of the country. And they inherited that from the Dutch. Well, they didn't really inherit it. You know how the colonial powers did it back then. They conquered, they signed treaties, and they moved from there. The Venezuelans, in the meantime, had declared their independence from Spain back in 1810, and then I think they actually 1811, sometime around then, and they actually achieved it around in the 1820s. All these years, Guyana was seen, this is British, what is now British Guyana, what is now Guyana, was seen as going all the way to the Orinoco. The British, the Dutch occupied all the way to the Orinoco. Around the 1850s, the mid 1800s, there was talk that Venezuela should really have its borders defined. By 1899, there was an international agreement, an international arbitration that led to the declaration of the borders, drawn based on the Schomburg line. A German cartographer drew the line, and 1899 was the year that the borders were delineated and defined. All sides accepted it. And when I say all sides, I mean Guyana, Brazil, and Venezuela. And of course, the international community, the United States, the United Kingdom, the rest of Europe, and of course, the rest of the world. It wasn't until Guyana was about to achieve independence in 1962 that the Venezuelans raised an issue based on a dead man's letter saying that this thing was cooked up and what have you. That does not work in international law. And that is why we are at this position. It is Venezuela that has made this, the controversy into a dispute.
Mm-hmm. All right, so you said since 1962, this issue of the border or the Essequibo issue concerning Venezuela, claiming, so they had an issue since 1962. Was it ever resolved? And given this newfound wealth, and you mentioned earlier that Guyana is about greed, given this new oil find that Guyana can boast of now, is it that you are saying that as a result of the new we'll call it gold, black gold, is it the justification why Guyana, Venezuela is now claiming that Essequibo belongs to them?
Let me say this, and unless I misinterpreted you, I said that the issue here is about greed. It's Venezuela's greed, not Guyana's greed.
Yeah.
We don't have Guyana does not have a border dispute with Venezuela. Venezuela has raised a controversy over the border. And when you have money, people tend to come after you. Either they come after you to get a small piece, as we say in Guyana and the Caribbean, or they come after you to get a big piece. And before this, the issue went to something called the Geneva Accord, the agreement in Geneva. And that was signed by the British government, the United Kingdom, in 1966, with agreement from Guyana. And Guyana's then Prime Minister Forbes Burnham consulted with the then opposition. I think the opposition leader, Dr. Cheddi Jagan, was out of the country, so he consulted with Ashton Chase and a guy named Mr. Hubbard. And there was the Geneva Accord. The Geneva Accord merely speaks to how the controversy will be settled. And that is, it doesn't speak to the fact that our borders have to be changed, but how you deal with the issue that Venezuela was raising, that this thing was a nullity. So Guyana, the United Kingdom, all said, well, bring the evidence and let the International Court of Justice, at first let the UN decide, that's the UN Secretary General, decide whether this matter was clouded in the kind of divisions and disagreements that the dead man claimed happened, and whether there was any fraud. Up to now, Venezuela has not produced a modicum of evidence, a tiller of evidence that indicates that there was a problem in 1899. On top of that, gentlemen, and all of those who are viewing and listening to this, not only that, Venezuela agreed in 1905 that there would be markers, and there was a marker put on Guyana's highest point that it shares with Venezuela and Brazil, Mount Roraima, indicating where the borders are.
Interesting. Stick up in there, Mr.
Why
Woolford.
they don't go fight with Brazil?
Stick up in there, Mr. Woolford, because I'm also seeing that the defense ministry in Brazil, they are also intensifying their defense on the northern part of their territory as well, in anticipation for what can probably go in local parlance haywire. But let me just come to what is taking place and as recent as what is to take place as recent as December the 3rd, where Venezuelans will be voting on a referendum. However, Guyana wants the International Court of Justice is expected to rule on Friday, this coming Friday, on a request by Guyana that the referendum be called off. Just give us an update with regards to that particular scenario there, Mr. Woolford.
Yes, on Friday at 3 o'clock, the International Court of Justice will rule on the provisional orders that Guyana sought. And Guyana sought very simple orders, saying, look, another country cannot, in their right senses, ask their population to decide on the territory of another state. It's as simple as that. And that is what has happened. The Venezuelan referendum not only wants to dismember Guyana, but it wants to say all the people who live in the territory that it wants to dismember, it will then give identification cards and nationality too. That doesn't happen in international law. What happens if tomorrow morning Venezuela decides that Tobago, based on the old Spanish go back since when thing, is now a part of Venezuela. And it will then make this a part of its territory based on another referendum, and then make their citizens Venezuelans. What do you think happens next? Almost all the wars in the world started because somebody decided that somebody else's territory or wealth or resources belong to them.
And
When
just
are
for
we
some,
going to stop this and have proper international law?
exactly, but just for some context here, is this particular region, the Essequibo, is it like 2/3 of Guyana's total land mass, Mr. Woolford?
Yes, it is, and we call it the Essequibo.
Essequibo.
And yes, we call it the Essequibo. And as far as we are concerned, the Essequibo belongs to Guyana. In fact, not as far as we're concerned. We know that the Essequibo belongs to Guyana because we meaningfully occupy, administer it all the years. Before that, the British administered it. Before that, the Dutch administered the same territory. And as I said earlier, it extended all the way to the Orinoco. The 1899 award caused Guyana to lose some landmass. Nobody talks about that. And in fact, even in Brazil, Guyana lost some landmass. So those borders were settled in 1899, and it's 2/3 of the territory. And there's another a caution, another serious problem. The land decides what the maritime boundaries will be. Of course, they're governed by two different international regimes in terms of law, but it derives from where the landmass is, and I think that might be the real intent of Venezuela.
Yeah.
Although they've been ramping this thing up for a number of years. Go ahead.
All right, I was just going to the other guy. All right, so 1905, there was that agreement that the boundaries were clear between Guyana and Venezuela. And I want to get to this. If the accord, the referendum rather, on tomorrow, which is the 1st of December, does not work in the favor of Guyana, what would be the next step? Do you think that it requires CARICOM intervention to prevent any possible dispute that might lead to some bloodshed maybe? So just speak to us from that standpoint. What is Guyana's next move after the referendum?
I'm just a journalist. I happen to know a little bit about international relations, so I can't speak on behalf of what the Guyana authorities, what the Guyana government would do, what the next move should be. But I can speculate that. And this is not as a journalist, this is somebody who knows a little bit about international relations, that Guyana needs and has been doing that. Guyana needs to energize, mobilize, and galvanize international support for our borders to remain what they have been all the years according to international law. It is as simple as that. Guyana is also a leading member of CARICOM, if I can use that adjective, because the CARICOM headquarters is located in Guyana. Okay? Now, do remember what Dr. Eric Williams said about Venezuela's imperial ambitions back then. So CARICOM, the Caribbean community, the Caribbean region, needs to be very concerned, because if my mind doesn't play tricks on me, there are some islands in the Caribbean that Venezuela has claimed over the years. And those islands are close to other Caribbean territories, other Caribbean states. Okay? So Venezuela might be giving us oil and things under the Petro-Carib thing. But one always has to be careful, as my mother used to say, whenever you come with gifts, what you want.
All right, but let me, and this is where I want to just focus on CARICOM a little bit further, given the role CARICOM plays in treating with issues affecting our CARICOM brothers, our neighbors, Guyana being part of CARICOM, Venezuela, a South American territory, and seems to be flexing its muscles, so to speak, as you have outlined. Who is next in terms of which territory they may want to claim? So what role should CARICOM play in this regard?
CARICOM should be very strong, and I think in not only issuing statements, but making it extremely clear that an attack on any one member of the community is an attack on all members of the community. One of the tenets of CARICOM is foreign policy coordination. And therefore, this is a foreign policy issue, and CARICOM, both individually and collectively, ought to come out and be very strong. Not just saying that we want the place to be a peaceful zone, but we accept that Guyana's borders were settled in 1899, demarcated by 1905, according to the three states that were involved, and they accepted them at that time. So individually and collectively, CARICOM should say that this is the position that we accept, this is the position that shall not be changed by the whim of a unilateral party in the world.
Okay.
I recall there's a saying that when Britain went to war, Barbados said, "Go Britain, Barbados is behind you." I hope Barbados and all the other countries, Grenada and Trinidad and Tobago, Jamaica, Antigua, all the other countries, will also say,
Okay.
Guyana, that we are behind you.
Okay, we hear that, Mr. Woolford. And before we close, of course, we understand that the President Ali, is not currently in Guyana, but upon returning, we would hear a statement. I'm hearing the Vice President responding to certain statements made by President Maduro. And we're seeing all that is taking place. But in terms of the mood in Guyana amongst the Guyanese people, what is the sense right now? How is the mood? Persons rallying up for any particular scenario that may occur, whether despite of which direction the referendum may go?
Yes, persons are concerned. There is some trepidation. I should say that, but Guyana the country is being rallied not only from the point of view of patriotism, but from the point of view of right. And Guyana is on the side of right here, not on the side. Venezuela is on the side, I think, of might. And the president, as you indicated, is out of the country. He's scheduled to return to Guyana by the 2nd of December, which is the day before the referendum will be held. And yes, so there have been some criticism that he's out and he should be on the ground, rallying the Guyanese and the troops, so to speak. But one of the good things about going to an international meeting is that you can also rally international support. Mm-hmm. So I hope that the president and the rest of the delegation, that they are meeting every single member of the international community while in Dubai, so that Guyana's strong position could be heard and could be accepted.
Okay. All right. We want to thank you, Mr. Woolford, for being with us this morning, and we're better off informed, that is, as far as the relationship or the situation that's brewing there. And we hope peace will be the outcome and we all can get along, because we don't want any more conflicts and war and bloodshed. And I'm sure that's what we all would want for that outcome between these two nations. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.
Very good.